Tonight, Batman the Dark Knight gives a 22-page essay on why Batman is just oh so broody. Teen Titans reminds us that the hormones of teenagers are literally the only thing that will guide them, and iVampire is actually incapable of doing anything wrong. I will stand by that until the day I die. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 60 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and we're just kind of going to rush through this intro bit because there is a one-shot this week that I talked for way too long about without realizing. So kind of pressed for time, but do want to mention 5th week next week. We'll be talking about annuals, a couple issues that I will talk about at the end, as well as some backups. So be sure to tune in next week for that. However, this week we have 13 comics coming out, including the number 13 issues of Batman the Dark Knight, Superman, Red Lanterns, The Flash, The Fury of Firestorm, The Savage Hawkman, All-Star Western, Teen Titans, iVampire, and Justice League Dark. Additionally, we have the number 4 issue of Batman Incorporated, the number 1 issue of Talon, which is coming out of last month's 0 issue, and that one shot I was talking about, National Comics Madam X, which is not Madam Xanadu, but it took me a while to get to the point where I was positive of that. Additionally, as I've said before, there are events going on near constantly now. We have Prelude to Hell on Earth happening in Superman, Part 1 of the Red Lanterns branch of Rise of the Third Army. We have Part 1 of Hawkman Wanted in the Savage Hawkman, which is just barely an event. And All-Star Western is, of course, part of our oh-so-favorite Black Diamond probability. At least a little bit more than the other ones have been. So, looking forward to that. But all in all, let's get into the comics this week. And we're starting off with Superman. Superman number 13, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Kenneth Rocafort. This is a prelude to Hell on Earth. What does that mean? I don't know. It barely relates. So, this issue opens up with Superman working out at a place called The Block, which is basically a science lab in the center of the Earth run by someone named Dr. Veritas. I think we've met this person before. They sound very familiar, but unfortunately not quite clicking for me. But anyway, basically has literally the entire weight of the world via one of these machines. And she's like, yeah, no, Superman, you are literally able to do this barely breaking a sweat. And you've been at it for 5 days now, so maybe call it quits. And he's like, all right, well, thanks for the help. I really do rely on you. You're a very good person and all. And thanks for not letting my secret out. And she's like, yeah, hey. And by the way, I just need to borrow a tiny little bit of your sweat. And he's like, you kidding me? I'm sweating? That's great. I've never sweat before. So she takes a bit of his sweat. He gives her a hug. And then he's like, oh, yeah, I've been down in the center of the earth for 5 days. I could probably use some sunlight. So he flies up to the surface of the sun. And he's like, boy, all right. Wish I could hang out up here, but unfortunately I got to get back to Clark Kent lifestyle. So he flies back into his apartment and he's like, all right, I got 6 seconds to shave, take a shower, do all that stuff. And so he goes into the shower and inside is Jimmy Olsen getting clean with a woman in there. It doesn't come back. Like, it doesn't relate to anything. We just had to see that Jimmy was getting lucky. So Clark then grabs all of his clothes and rushes out to Daily Planet, where he gets chewed out by Perry because he hasn't done anything all week. And Clark's like, hey, you want me on the Superman beat, but sometimes Superman just disappears for a week. I don't know what you want me to do in that case. He's like, then do something, literally anything. Like, you have to do your job, Clark. And Lois is in the room as well, and she starts chewing him out as well. But before she can really get too into it, where Clark is like starting to fight back against her, she gets a text message and Clark x-ray visions it and sees that it's from a guy named Jonathan saying, hey, I'm so happy that we're moving in together. And she's like, so am I, LOL. And then Clark leaves all dejectedly and sad. And he's like, man, Do I still like Lois? I feel like something would have happened there. Also, in Justice League number 12, I made out with Wonder Woman, so maybe I've moved on. I don't know. But at this point, Morgan Edge comes up to his computer, and he's like, hey, Clark, I talked to the IT guys, and it turns out that you, my Superman guy, has been searching for things like, oh, I don't know, housing violations and the plights of the poor. So maybe don't do that. And he says it much more angrily than that, and basically tells him, like, look, do your job or you're fired. And Clark then does the whole thing. He takes off his glasses, which, mind you, he takes off his glasses and he literally starts making a speech in the center of the bullpen being like, now you listen here, Mr. Edge. I believe in journalistic integrity. I don't believe in just pumping out whatever pop news you think people want to hear. We are here for the news, God damn it. And we're here for truth and justice and, dare I say, the American way. Who's with me? And everyone else in the office is just like, oh, hey, look over there. There's some things going on. And so Morgan Edge does just straight up fire him. So then we see some time passes, and he's actually talking to Cat Grant, who is like, no, like, I followed up right up after you. I told him, like, hey, if you want some stupid blonde to cover the gossip rags, you're going to have to find someone better than me. And he's like, thank you, Cat. I think that's helpful. But before he can get too much into it, he hears a giant beast moving through Metropolis, and he looks up and sees in between the skyscrapers this like dragon head moving through. So he immediately goes Superman, and he's like, well, guess I got to deal with this before I deal with Clark Kent's personal life. But then we see the little dragon head is actually just the toe, which is a dragon head, of a much larger dragon that is like at least 3 times the size of any skyscraper in Metropolis. And he's like, okay, all right, this is new. So he goes up and he knocks out the head, just one punches it. It goes down, but then he's immediately attacked by all the like claws and toes of this dragon that are, again, themselves dragon heads. And one of them knocks him with his tail, which knocks him the entire way over to Ireland. So that happened. And he meets up with some miners that he just crashed into the rig of. And he's like, hey, everybody, there's a dragon coming. I'm going to use my super breath to blow you all to safety. And then he did. And then the dragon just shows up. And he's literally got a thing here saying, I've got about 2 minutes before the dragon shows up. And then it's just right there. So I don't know why he thought he had 2 minutes. But regardless, dragon grabs him up. He's trying to like view it on a molecular level to see if there's any weak spots. But he's not quite sure if he can find any. But he sees that its DNA is literally decaying. So he just looks down. The miners were drilling for oil. He lights it up with his heat vision. Giant explosion. And the dragon is seemingly incinerated. So he's like, all right, cool. Glad I managed to take care of that. But then when he looks up in the midst of the explosion, he sees Supergirl, his cousin. And the cousin's like, hey, you lied to me. And Superman's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And we're literally like, today's the worst day for you to do this. And she's like, shut up. You don't get to talk to me. You said that we were the last 2 survivors from Krypton. But that giant dragon thing, don't tell me that you didn't recognize it as a tripedal curiosianian. I'm genuinely trying with that name, which is apparently a prehistoric animal indigenous to Krypton. So Krypton must still be alive. And then there's literally a narration box here saying, impossibly, neither Cal nor his cousin recognizes that there is someone else literally hovering over them like 10 feet away. And it's Hale. I'm just going to skip that. It's Hale. It's the guy that is the event. This is why it's a prelude. Okay. A lot going on in this issue. Gonna preface it with the art is fantastic. Kenneth Rocafort is always great. Looks great the whole way through. My only real critique here is kind of like the whole middle bit. And honestly, a bit at the beginning. It's pretty much everything right up until the dragon shows up. Because it is, I don't want to say out of character for Clark, because he has always had, like, when he's Clark, he's really had this, like, real journalistic bent of, like, no, we got to do the real news. And that's been something since the beginning of Superman. I'm fine with that. But it's more so of, like, he literally took off his glasses and made a Superman speech in the middle of this bullpen and nobody noticed. And then there was just, I don't know. everything just felt very disjointed. Like, none of it was really relating to each other. It was just kind of like, okay, no, we're just generally showing what Clark's doing in his life. Like, remember Jimmy Olsen's getting laid? You do now. So, yeah, it's collectively as a whole issue, it's a little bit haphazard, but the art is fantastic, and I really do like that last bit. Even if I'm just like, this dragon's breaking the laws of nature. Sure, it's Kryptonian, but like, a thing that size cannot just show up and Superman doesn't notice. Like, that's... Then again, they're not noticing a Kryptonian literally 10 feet above their head. So, hey, maybe Superman's just an idiot now. Overall, it's a 7. Most of that is the art. But it is a rocky start to the event because I don't really feel like I have any clue as to what's going on yet. So, we'll see what happens next time. I believe in Superboy or Supergirl number 14. Red Lanterns number 13, written by Peter Milligan, art by Miguel Sepulveda. This is the first part to the Red Lanterns branch of Rise of the Third Army, and the entire first half of this book is just recounting, hey, just in case you're coming into this event not knowing who the Red Lanterns are, here's kind of their gist. So we open up on this planet called Artki, and it is a war-torn planet. There's a couple of, like, barbarian roaming tribes or whatever, and we see that one of them has captured a pair of sisters, murdered their parents, and they're like, late teens. So the leader of the barbarians, named Cord, is like, I will take this younger, beautiful one to be our dancer. The other one can be used for domestics and whatnot. So they brand the sisters with the guy's symbol and then force them to do all their work and dance for them and whatever else, and they barely feed them like any sort of scraps, and they're treated like animals and whatever. And this goes on for quite a period of time until one night Cord picks the younger sister named Taya, and he's like, you'll be dancing for me personally tonight. And the sister's like, no, please, free her, she's just still a girl. And Cord's like, well, I have no use for you, and he just slits the older sister's throat. And Taya, of course, is not super cool with this, and she yells out in anguish and pain and rage. And across the galaxy, the Red Lanterns feel that rage, feel that pain, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, let's go do that. So back on the planet, the night is calm, and she does her dance, and apparently she has some sort of power. Like, it's very vague. I think her power might just be entrancing them in, like, a dance or something like that. So she gets them all to drink to the point where, like, they're overly drunk and they can't stay awake. So then she uses that night in order to escape. And she runs through some woods and stuff like that until she comes across an itty-bitty tiny little camp that consists of just a husband-wife. And the husband is like, you said Cord? You said that you ran away from Cord? No, we're not getting involved. And the wife's like, oh, shut up. Yeah, no, we'll take you in. Come here. So at that point, Taya and the wife bond a little bit. And she's just like, between you and me, I would have left my husband, too. He's kind of a dick. And they laugh about it. And then Cord shows up. And he's like, hey, would you happen to have one of my runaways? And the husband's like, oh, yeah, my bitch wife and her are inside. He literally says that. And he's just like, oh, all right, well, guess I'll take them then. And so he's literally willing to take the wife as well. And the husband's like, what can I get for her? Like, give me like $5 and we'll call it even. So at this point, she's like, no, we'll kill the wife. Like, we're not gonna do anything with the wife. So Taya's freaking out, like, no, if you kill her, you'll have to kill me too. And he's like, okay, I really don't have a problem with that. So he kills the wife and also kills Taya. And as Taya is bleeding out on the ground in a pool of her own blood, who shows up at that point but Atrocitus? And he's just like, hey, we were here by great rage. Who's the one who caused it? And looks over at Taya bleeding out on the ground. It's like, hey, you've got great rage in your heart. If our power battery was at 100%, we'd probably get you a ring. But unfortunately, you're just going to have to settle for this. And she's just like, oh, there's no justice. There's no, the universe is a cruel and ungrateful place. And then he's like, all right, well, let me show you a little bit of justice. So he looks at Cord and is just like, oh, we have found you to be guilty. And he's just like, I can get you gold. I can get you women. And Atrocitus just rips off his head. And Taya's like, there's also the husband of this wife. He's also a dick. Also get him. And we meet a Red Lantern named Scorch who steps up. And apparently her whole thing is she can literally just incinerate an entire body just with her hand. And Rancor, the human Red Lantern's also there. And he's like, yeah, I try to stay out of the way of Scorch. She's a bit hardcore. So at that point, we finally get into the event tie-in. And the Third Army, one of them, just shows up out of nowhere, tries to attack Rancor, and Atrocitus takes the body of one of the barbarians and just uses it as a baseball bat and just sends the Third Army guy way across the woods. But he's not out, and there's more of them coming. So at this point, fight breaks out. Atrocitus realizes, like, the Red Lantern, like, energy doesn't work on them. They just move right through it. They don't even feel anything. So we see everyone's tied up in a fight, and it seems like all of them are trying to rip off their arms. And Scorch is the first one to lose the fight, loses her arm. Atrocitus freaks out over it, as we then see that she is brought into the Third Army. She's absorbed and, I'm missing the word, assimilated, that's it. And it turns out that her Red Lantern heart, when that happens, just kind of extrudes itself. It just pops out of the body. And it's just like, you purged her heart. What in the hell are you? So at that point, Atrocitus puts it together like, okay, you're taking off our arms so we don't have our power rings, and then you're killing us. Okay, yeah, I get it. So then Atrocitus starts really laying into them, and he realizes that the eyes of each of these things is not the eye, like they belong to the original. So he's like, those aren't your eyes. Those are different eyes. What happens if I pull them out? And so he pulls out the eyes of, I believe, the one belonging to Scorch. And at that point, it seemingly kills one of them, but also affects all the rest of them in that they are all feel that because they're all part of a hive mind. So he's like, all right, well, we know that they can be hurt. We know that they can bleed. Therefore, we can kill them. So the fight is about to get on with that. And then we cut over one last shot to Taya, who's like, my captors were killed. Maybe there is some justice in the universe, as a Third Army guy shows up and assimilates her as well. So, not that much justice. This was good. I really do. I think that out of all of the Third Army branches, this is the one that I think feels the most in line with what I was expecting. It is just straight horror of just, here is essentially a zombie horde. How do you deal? And I think that the Red Lanterns did a good job of A, they laid down an immediate weakness. B, they set up how terrifying these guys can be by saying how one of their strongest members was then attacked and killed. It just did a fantastic job of not only showing how they can survive, but also why it is so difficult to kill them in the first place. So, no, I think that out of all the Third Army stuff, this is probably one of the stronger ones. Art-wise as well, I think that this does the best of making them menacing. Everywhere else, I think they had like a style sheet, and it was just kind of like thick lines and very not scratchy in any given way. It was very clean. This one, Miguel Sepulveda, really lays into like the scratchiness of it, and you feel like these things are otherworldly sort of creatures. So definitely enjoy that. Overall, I guess I'd say this one's an 8. My only real critique is that, like I said, the first half of that was just like, hey, in case you're coming into this event without having read Red Lanterns, here's what the Red Lanterns do. Like, that didn't feel necessary for me having been in it, but of course, for other readers, it very well may have been. So, not a huge complaint, but still there. So, 8 for this. Looking forward to seeing the Red Lantern branch continue on further. The Savage Hawkman, number 13, written by Rob Liefeld and Frank Thierry, art by Joe Bennett. This is the first part of Hawkman Wanted, a crossover between Hawkman, Green Arrow, and Deathstroke. And let me tell you, it barely constitutes as a part. So this entire issue is just, okay, we picked up in issue 12 with Hawkman being attacked by Shayera, the Thanagarian. Then we got a whole issue where it's revealed that Hawkman's actually an alien. I forgot he was an alien, and then he crashed down and became Carter Hall. His real name is Qatar Hall. I'm just going to call him Carter Hall or Hawkman. So this entire issue is literally just like a game of hot potato, but with fight scenes. So he's pinned down by Shayera. Pike's got an eye on him and Emma, and she's just like, all right, you're wanted for murder, and we're going to take you in, so let's go. And as Hawkman's led into the ship, he causes a distraction enough for Emma to pull out a gun that she apparently stole during some battle between Pike. I don't even remember if that happened or not. But anyway, she fires off a few shots, calls them pigeons, and then Hawkman grabs her and flies off. They manage to get like maybe 30 feet away before Shayera fires off a harpoon gun, is the best I can describe it, and clips both of Hawkman's wings. And she's like, aha, you've been away too long. You've forgotten about our advanced technology. So now I will string you up and blah, blah. And so she beats up Emma a little bit. Emma's top comes off because, of course, it has to in a Rob Liefeld book. And there's like, okay, now that that's done, let's get you back on the ship. And as they are once again leading them onto the ship, an explosion comes and knocks them all down. And it's Xerxes from like 4 issues ago who wanted the Nth Metal Armor. He shows up with a bunch of his guys and he's just like, hey, I'm here for the Nth Metal Armor. And Shayera chimes in being like, hey, he's ours and he's wanted for murder. And Xerxes is like, I don't care. I'm just here to take what I want. And in fact, I could probably take your armor too. So they get into a fight. Xerxes gets the upper hand long enough, along with his men, to take out Shayera and the rest of the Thanagarians there. And then Emma sneaks into the ship just because we need her set up for later. So then we see Pike. He's like, all right, well, screw this. I wasn't paid for all this. So he gets onto his ship trying to, I guess, just get away. And as Xerxes is about to go into the Thanagarian ship, Hawkman just swoops him up. They fight for a little bit. Hawkman 100% has the upper hand on him. Basically just knocks him out. Pike, he's on his ship. He's about to fire at Hawkman. And right before he does, Emma comes out with a gun to Pike's head and says, hey, I could shoot you now too. Remember me? And he's like, oh, geez. Okay. So at this point, the 3 main antagonists are all officially dealt with, and Hawkman and Emma stand over them and just like, all right, now I'm going to show you I'm not the guy you want. And Shayera's like, you definitely are. And Xerxes like, yeah, no, like, I still want your armor. And he's like, all right, well, you say I'm this intergalactic criminal, but whatever. So he basically, like, Emma's like, what do we do with these guys now? And all they do is seemingly just blow up their ship and leave. Like, he doesn't exactly try to kill them. He just blows up their ship and leaves. So, whatever. At that point, Xerxes turns to Shayera and is just like, hey, have you ever heard the saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend? And she's like, I'm listening. So then Hawkman flies away with Emma finally, and it's just like, well, I wonder if me being in a situation where I'm wanted is going to lead to any other hijinks soon. Like, oh, I don't know, Hawkman wanted. It literally says, then this is only just the beginning, as we see he's being trailed by some more Thanagarian guys. Okay, so, like, this could have been done in, like, 3 pages. Probably less, if I'm being honest. It's not... There was no need for this to be 22 issues of... I mean, 4 of those pages were literally just Hawkman without any issue at all beating the crap out of Xerxes and, like, barely saying a word the entire time. He literally says, I figured that since you want this armor so badly, I should probably show you what it can do. And then he fights for 2 straight pages and says, end of demonstration. And then they just don't interact until the end of the issue again. Like, this was so padded out just to be like, okay, well, I wanted to tell that 0 issue, and then I was told I'm starting an event, but, like, the event's pretty much done. Like, not done, but, like, it didn't need to exist. I guess that's my biggest thing here, is that I see no reason. There's no, especially because they're talking about intergalactic criminals, and we're going to cross over with Green Arrow and Deathstroke, which, like, I can understand Deathstroke maybe being pulled in, but Green Arrow, that's weak at best. So, yeah, not the best issue by far. I'd say art-wise, it's okay. It's the same as it has been. I followed the fights. My only issue is that when he's, again, these pages where he's beating up Xerxes, I don't know why I dislike these so much. Every time Xerxes get hit, he has the same face. Like, I'm pretty sure it's just like copy pasted and rotated. Like, it's the exact same face every time. And there's nothing wrong with using some reference material, but dear Lord, mix it up a little. So yeah, overall, this is like a 6. More so in that it doesn't really offend me. Like, it's not that it deserves a higher score, but there are, like, bad things knocking it down. It's that it deserves a lower score, but I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm more so just being bitter over the fact that it's not doing anything I like. So, yeah, it's a 6. I hope any of that rambling made sense. But yeah, next time I think is in Green Arrow, maybe Deathstroke. I don't know. At some point, we're going to see a crossover. Just deal with it. All-Star Western number 13, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Moritat. This is a part of the Black Diamond probability. I mean, more so than others, at the very least. So, one thing I need to go back and cover is that at the end of the 0 issue, a woman was stepping off a boat, and I didn't know who she was. And I still don't know a lot about who she is, because they only next issue give her the name that I recognized her by, but I had to page ahead to get to that. It's the Barbary Ghost. If you don't know who that is, it was a backup story from like 6 months ago that I guess they're just expecting us to remember. So she's here looking for her mother. There. That's all. She's good at kung fu. And she's looking for her mother. That's it. Anyway, this issue picks up. We're in Gotham. Specifically at a cathedral or a church of some type, and we see that a priest is being attacked while another priest is already dead, like throat slashed. And we hear this laughter throughout the church, and we see that there is a clown named Jingles who is just going around killing these priests, and he literally gives his backstory through laughter, saying like, oh yes, I used to be an altar boy, and one of the priests took a special liking to me, and now I'm taking a special liking to you. And so he shows up, and the priest is like, please, we can get you forgiveness. Like, it's not too late. You can still have your soul saved. And he's like, oh, okay, you're gonna play it that way. Well, let's do things my way first. And he takes this giant meat cleaver and just stabs the priest like a dozen times. So morning comes, authorities come across the priests, and then they call in Dr. Arkham, Jonah Hex, and Tallulah Black, and basically just looking at it, they're like, okay, well, maybe this is the kind of crazy that Dr. Jekyll's, like, dude was telling us was going to be showing up, or maybe this is just normal Gotham crazy. Honestly, bit hard to tell, but we do see that, like, this was a clown in Gotham who kills people, and he also, like, smeared the blood onto their mouths to make it look like they're smiling. Do you see the parallels? Anyway, they're just like, well, we don't know what's going on yet, but these guys can go ahead and be put down, and I think we're looking for either a clown or somebody who's afraid of clowns. Hey, isn't Haley's Circus in town? So that night comes, they go to Haley's Circus, but not before we meet up with Barbary Ghost, who is backstage talking to some contortionists, I guess. And he's like, hello, I am looking for my mother. Do you know where Yanmei Sen is? Or no, sorry, she's Yanmei Sen. Do you know where my mother is? And they're like, no, we don't. But even if we did tell you that she's with the golden dragons who are very dangerous, we couldn't tell you because they're very dangerous. And she's like, okay, well, where are they? And she turns around, and of course they're right there. And she's like, oh, you were looking for us. You shouldn't have come to Gotham. So fight scene breaks out, and it is just... It's a very kinetic fight scene. It flows very well. I followed the action extremely easily. Hard to describe, but it's a very good fight scene. But at one point, she's flat on her back. Also, there are tigers in cages. That comes up a little bit later, but she literally pushes one of the men towards the tiger cage, and it mauls him to death. So at this point, she's on her back. A guy's about to attack her with a spear, and Jonah Hex stops up, grabs him by the ponytail, yanks him off. And Tallulah holds a gun to his head to basically call him off. And at that point, they're like, hey, where'd that woman go? She just disappeared like a ghost. So we cut over to as far as I can tell, the ringmaster of Haley's Circus. I'm not sure they really have a name. But she's like, yeah, no, we're missing a few people. There's the amazing Balthus, who's our tattooed man. There's our knife thrower, Darla. And there's our clown, Jingles. And they're like, okay, well, Jingles sounds like, the way to go here. So could you tell us where they are? And he's like, I don't know. They just disappeared. But we're like a family here. There's no way they do anything. And Jingles is our clown. He's super nice. He's a clown. So at that point, we cut outside and we see that a guy named Mickey is selling a snake oil cure-all tonic or whatever. And a bunch of people in the crowd are buying it up. But before we can really get too into that, we see that the crowd has to disperse because Jingles showed back up with a gun and his cleaver. And he's like, hey, everybody, start laughing as he starts killing people indiscriminately. And before he can get too far, Jonah steps up, just shoots him in the head. And he's just like, well, all right, guess it was Jingles. That answers that question, everybody. But again, before they can go too far, we see that another guy, I want to say the lion tamer, but it's tigers, so the tiger tamer, he's let all of the tigers out of their cages, telling them to be free. They don't have to be trapped in this garden anymore. So at this point, the tigers start attacking the gang, and they start, they're firing off shots. They're managing to kill a few of them. One of the tigers turns on the tiger tamer, and he's like, no, wait, I love you. That's a literal quote. He actually says that. And Jonah shoots the tiger, but not before it's too late for him. So at this point, they're like, okay, people are going a little bit more crazy than usual in Gotham. So clearly this has to be that thing that Dr. Jekyll told us about. Do you have somebody here who is selling some sort of elixir or potion or something? And he's like, that guy McKee, he just showed up and joined our thing a couple months back, but I don't see how he's related. And Arkham's like, all right, well, we'll explain to the authorities. So then we cut over to Dr. Jekyll, who is, I think, at a boatyard, and he's inside a ship, and he's down near this lower deck that's locked up. No way anybody's getting in there. He opens it up, he steps inside, and inside is Dr. Jekyll. But it isn't actually Dr. Jekyll, it's Mr. Hyde. Mr. Hyde's like, Jekyll's not in right now. I hope that you brought me someone to eat, or at the very least, brought me back my little black diamond. Oh, see, I said black diamond, and it's here. We did it. Congratulations, everybody. This issue's okay. It's a little bit frustrating in terms of when we left off in the 12th issue, we were like, okay, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, that's the thing we're moving into here. But I feel like it didn't do a good job of showing me that Gotham is getting crazier because we only saw two people, It didn't see, I don't know, I just didn't get enough of it being the whole city's gone mad. It just struck me more as, no, this clown and this tiger tamer, and that's it. So, I don't know, I could have used a little bit more build up on that. Clearly, if we're doing Black Diamond stuff, we are beholden to that time scale. But I don't know. I think I could have seen a little bit more of like, no, let's see these people actually going Mr. Hyde, like full on all the way that, instead of it just being this lightweight sort of, oh no, it's an evil clown in Gotham, which, yes, I understand, but at the same time. Also, the whole Barbary Ghost thing, that was a lot to put on the reader to have them remember back to a backup story that only lasted, I think, like 2 issues from 6 months ago. That should have had a little box that said, like, hey, check this out at the very least. So, yeah, a little bit iffy on that front. Art-wise, fine, and I like the plot that's moving forward enough, but this particular issue is just kind of whatever. So, overall, though, I'm going to say 6.5. It just doesn't quite do enough for me. And it seems like we've already kind of, because they're already catching up to the potion guy. So, like, I'm not sure how much more damage can really be done in that case. And I don't know, it's kind of a letdown for me, but we'll see where it goes. Batman Incorporated number 4, written by Grant Morrison, art by Chris Burnham. Last issue, we left off with Robin stopping being Robin, becoming Redbird, and breaking into a facility after his dad specifically grounded him. Also, his dad, Batman, was dressed up as Matches Malone, was seemingly trapped because he was lured in by a pretty lady who was in trouble, and Leviathan got to her first, or she's working with Leviathan, hard to say. Anyway, we open up, and it's across from the Monarch Theater, where, of course, Batman's parents died, and we see it's Talia. I don't know if it's supposed to be a mystery, but it's, like, obviously Talia, and she's wearing, like, a skull mask, and she's like, oh, I will take everything from Batman the way he took my son from me, and the big dude behind Talia is like, I thought I was your son. And she's like, you are. I got a lot of sons. Whatever. Batman's going to face oblivion. So we see Matches Malone still being strangled by a hangman, and he drops one of his matches into a line of gunpowder that he left as he walked into the room. And the judge there is like, quick, stomp it out before he does whatever he's going to do. And the hangman goes over and tries to stomp it out. It gets a little bit out of his reach and starts moving down the hallway. Then we see Matches is like, I just set a new world record and holding my breath. Someone called Guinness. So then an explosion goes off and we see all the other rest of the members of Batman Inc. storm in. It's called the Kill Box. And it's literally just everybody's fighting in this house for the whole issue. So I don't know the name of this one guy because they literally never say it. But he is like an archer and he's got a cross on him. So, yeah. Anyway, him and El Gacho just spend like half the issue arguing about like, why is it we can't get along despite the fact that we are both Batman of our respective countries, blah, blah, blah. Let's put it away our differences. But then El Gacho takes an arrow to the arm because Merlin is there. And this whole place is just swarming with League of Assassins guys. We see Robin outside. He's finally like grappling hooking his way in. And the other dude, he shows up and he's like, all right, well, I'll use my bow and arrow to take him out. And he's Malcolm just like destroys his bow and arrow with his own arrows. So he's like, all right, other assassins can go finish him. So it's just a knockout brawl sort of thing. Merlin makes his way upstairs and he's met by Wingman, who I think was told in an earlier issue he was like second in command, but regardless, Wingman's knocking guys out. He makes his way to Merlin, and Merlin's about to fire off a shot at Wingman, but then we see Red Robin. Sorry, not Red Robin, Red Bird. There are too many birds and bats here. So he fires off an arrow, shoots into Merlin's hand, and then Wingman's like, oh, hey. Oh, wait, you're here. You're not supposed to be here. And we see inside the room that Matches was. Batman's already been like beating them all up. And he's like, all right, well, my Matches disguise is bust. So he starts taking it off and he's like, Damian, why are you here? I literally told you not to be here. He's like, you said Robin was grounded. You didn't say anything about Redbird. Besides, I came here to help you. And he's like, Damian, they are here for you. They want to get you. You have to be back at home for your own protection. Why is there blood on your cape? And he's like, that belongs to some dogs. It's whatever. No big deal. So at this point, Batman gets turned into Batman. And he's like, all right, Alfred, start phase 2. So the rest of the Bat family comes busting in. We got Knight, we got Nightwing, we got Red Robin. And they're all just coming in. Squire knocks out the lights, so the rest of the Bat family's fighting in the dark. And Batman just calls out saying, like, all right, Leviathan, Talia, talk to me. Let's how many more people can you afford to lose? And she's like, I got a few more. So Batwing's on top of the roof seeing a bunch of werebats coming in, aka people affected with man-bat serum. And Batman's like, hey, yeah, just use a sonic blast. Like, of course that's going to work. So he does, and it does. And then Batwing takes some blood from one of their wings. He doesn't do anything with it yet, but I feel like I should mention it just in case he does. So then we meet up with the Goat Man, who, or maybe it was Goat Boy, I can't remember. The assassin who, like, faked that he killed Damien. So we see that he's holding the singer at gunpoint, and it turns out that, like, this is going to be his third sacrifice in order to get in with the League of Assassins, and he's not going to have to listen to Batman or anybody else ever again. And then Batman shows up being like, hey, we're going to take care of your kid. We know you're doing this all to take care of your kid. We'll take care of your kid. You got to let her go. And he's like, nah, I'm done working for you, Batman. I faked that picture of Robin being dead for your sake because you asked me to. But now Leviathan's offering more than you. And then the singer stabs a fork in his neck and he bleeds out. Because that's just how this works. And apparently the singer, she said she had a sister who had multiple sclerosis. Turns out she doesn't. She's the one who has multiple sclerosis, so Batman's like, I'll take the fall for the murder thing. Here's some pills for your multiple sclerosis. Okay, bye. So they've taken care of the entire League of Assassins. Calls back up to Talia and it's just like, all right, well, you ready to talk now, Talia? And she's like, oh yeah, well, how about you tell our son about who Wingman really is? And this whole time, Redbird has been like, I know you, Wingman. I recognize your fighting style and your tone of voice, but I just can't place you. Who are you? And it turns out that he was a double agent. And when I say that, it means that used to work for Talia, now works for Batman. And who is it? It's Jason Todd, the Red Hood, who is not only wearing a Wingman-like helmet, but also like a fake prosthetic mask under the helmet. So there's that. And Damien's like, why? Like, why are we bothering with this idiot? Who cares about him? And he's just like, no, he works with Talia because of the Lazarus Pit. Whatever. It's a whole thing. Anyway, he was on the inside for a while, and now he's helping Batman. And basically, the end of the issue is Batman saying, here's the deal, Damien. You need to stop being Robin, and you need to go back with your mom. Because if you keep being Robin, Gotham will literally burn to the ground and it will be all your fault. And then we see next time Batman 666. Now here's the one thing I do know from research is that Batman 666 pre-New 52 continuity was a Grant Morrison written story of Damian in the future being Batman and everything had went to hell. So this seems to be an issue that takes place in that same sort of timeline of Damian being Batman. So that will come up next time. This issue, though. Okay, it relies a lot on things that I'm assuming happened before the reboot. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's just not accessible for me personally. I don't know who the hell Wingman is and why he's important to this whole thing. I don't get this whole rivalry between El Gacho and the other guy. Like, they keep pulling on all these threads that I'm supposing were there beforehand, but I don't know that. This is not accessible for a new reader, and I don't think it was supposed to be. This is the end to his run. But they had to have known when they started it again at issue number 1 that there would be people who would not go back. And I don't think they've done enough to help those readers, aka me. So overall, while I do think it is a fine enough issue, I think that there are problems inherently with the storytelling having not read the pre-New 52 stuff. So I'm going to give this a 6.5. I recognize that if you have read that stuff, this is probably a good issue, had some probably very strong reveals to it, but that didn't work for me. So personally, 6.5. Batman The Dark Knight number 13, written by Gregg Hurwitz, art by David Finch. This is just an extended deep dive into Batman psychology. Like, if you took a college class on like psychology of superhero comics and you had to write a thesis paper, this is just it. It's just so wordy, and it's just, anyway. So we open up, Scarecrow is still like torturing that little girl that he kidnapped, and she's like, hey, Mr. Scarecrow, could you let me out? I made this for you. Please let me out. And she passes a picture under the door of Scarecrow and her like stick figures holding hand underneath like a smiley face sun. And he's like, oh, kid, you're making this so hard for me to do my thing. So then we see him flashing back to when his father trapped him down in the cellar to make him fear things. And it's like down in the cellar is just a menagerie of horrifying objects, from demons to skeletons to what seem to be actual corpses. And then because Batman was captured in the previous issue, he wakes up and he's like, activate wrist armor laser, and he burns his way out of where he's being held. Then he makes his way down a hallway, is attacked by a Scarecrow with a scythe, who literally just chops open his entire thorax. And then Batman's trying to crawl into a little bit of sunlight. He can't make it, and he dies. And then, of course, it turns out, oh, this is all just fear toxin. Like, it was all just a hallucination. And Scarecrow's like, here's the deal, Batman. I've got new fear toxin that's so super potent, it would actually infect me. Like, I would be messed up by it. So right now, I'm just going to go ahead and put on this gas mask, and we're going to try it on you. And then we just get an extended thing of a guy named Braxton Winthrop, who was apparently possibly a real person in the DC universe, possibly entirely fictional in both. I don't know. But regardless, Braxton Winthrop, he was a millionaire who ran this whole big enterprise thing, but he like walked the walk and did the talk. Like he actually went into soup kitchens and helped people. He donated God knows how much money. He like helped people like just by donating and being there and being a good person. It's like he walked in the light, and he had the same sort of tragedy in his past. His parents, they died when he was young in a plane accident. He inherited the fortune, but it was made via like small arms, like they sold rifles, and he sold the business, used that money to get into a better business of philanthropy, and then, he just became a better person. And the whole thing is he's just like, so what's your excuse, Batman? You literally had the exact same sort of thing, but like you just chose the dark. You actively always choose the dark. And he's like, no, shut up. I didn't choose the dark. I had the light taken from me. He's like, no, you didn't. You purposely like stop seeing people. Like, you always have a girlfriend but never a wife. You have your like wards, but you never adopt them as your son. And even your real son, like, you refuse to recognize him in public. And Batman this whole time's like, you can't know this. You don't know any of this. You don't know who I am under the mask. No, you can't. You don't know any of this. So shut up, stop talking. And Scarecrow's like, what are you talking? I haven't said a word. You've just been talking to yourself. And then it just keeps on going, where it's just like, when you're dead, no one's going to mourn you. You have completely shut yourself off. You will have nothing once you're gone, Batman. And he's genuine. Like, this is all his own fears that he's himself posing on himself. So yeah, it's a whole thing. And then Batman, after a while, he's just like, Scarecrow, you suck so much. How did you even end up this bad? And we get one last thing of, he was thrown down in the cellar by his dad. His dad's taking some readings of like, oh, he's fear, blah, blah, blah. And then he gets to do a coughing fit. And it turns out he had a heart attack, and he just died while his son was trapped down in the cellar. And nobody came to check on the house for, I believe it was like over a week. So finally cops came, they kicked in the door, saw him dead at his keyboard, and then pried up the cellar where Jonathan was kept and walked him out. And he's like, yeah, that's how it came to me. Anyway, thank you, Batman, for being a good guinea pig. I'm going to go get my scythe now. And then we see the same sort of thing happen again where he's like, activate wrist laser. But he's not wearing his glove. He doesn't have a wrist laser on. So at that point, he's like, all right, I'm going to have to use all my inner strength. And he focuses, and they both are doing this like back and forth monologue where it's all their internal thoughts, but they're doing like a back and forth here where it's like how they make the fear their own and they conquer it in their own ways and blah, blah, blah. And Batman ends up breaking free of the chain, and he's like, big mistake, Scarecrow, leaving me in the same room where my suit was. So, yeah, that's where it leaves off. Again, this is just, like, it doesn't so much have a plot as much as it has a thesis. Like, this entire arc, all that has really happened is Scarecrow kidnapped the kid, Batman found Scarecrow, and now he's wrapped up in one of Scarecrow's fear things. But, like, nothing has actually happened. And that's not inherently bad, but, like, you got to go into it knowing that. Knowing that you're not getting just, like, Batman fighting against some, oh no, my parents are alive again in front of me, but they're disappointed in my life choices. It's like, no, this is literally just, here's what Batman as like a thesis statement represents. And in that light, I think it's very well done. I think it's a decent look. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I'm the kind of guy who goes onto YouTube and I look at like here's what this scene means in this movie, and here's what the true meaning of this video game is, and stuff like that. So I've seen a bunch of videos that are, here's this deep dive into The Dark Knight, into Robert Pattinson's Batman, into blah, blah, blah. So, like, I've heard this exact same thing over and over and over again. So, how it would have been back in 2012? Maybe different. But for me personally, having been in that deep dive, it just seems a little bit like, okay, yeah, but, like, I get it. Okay? Like, I don't think that it's bad, but I do think that, me personally, it's a bit repetitive at this point. So, overall, though, I do recognize that it is well crafted, so I will give it a 7. I think that it is very well drawn. I think that the give and take in the narration and using narration boxes to enforce, like, is Scarecrow talking or is it Batman to himself? In the craft wise, very well done. But as to what it's actually doing itself, could work for other people. Just a bit repetitive for me of like, yeah, no, we get it. This is how Batman thinks. Okay, moving on. Talon #1, written by James Tynion IV and Scott Snyder, art by Guillem March. Last issue was a 0 issue, just kind of introduced the character, and then some indeterminate amount of time passed, and we see that Calvin Rose, aka the eponymous Talon, has discovered that Night of the Owls happened, and the Court of Owls is seemingly defunct because they just went big and then apparently everyone killed themselves. So he's like, alright, I gotta make sure. So he goes to one of the locations where there was like a Talon's nest hidden inside the building, and he's like, I'm just going to go in and I'm just going to check the computers and make sure that like there's no network activity or anything like that, and then I can finally stop running from them. So he skydives off a GCPD blimp, which I don't even know how he got onto it to begin with, and he makes his way down into an old abandoned train station, which is apparently where they had it, because it was a whole thing of they controlled the train station, so they were able to control who left Gotham, because Gotham was actually just a big trap. So he walks in, he gets into the place, and he's like, okay, all right, there's no alarms or anything just as I walk in, so that's cool. So he makes his way over to one of the computers, and at that point, one of the Court of Owl crests activates and like scans him, and he's like, you're Calvin Rose, alert, alarm, kill this guy. So he's like, ah, crap, all right, there's still an alarm. And we see an old guy somewhere across town has gotten the message for this alarm, and he's like, ah, geez, here we go. So he goes and he disconnects the alarm, and he stops it from going off. But then, whoops, wouldn't you know it, there's still a Talon around. And this one is female, seemingly significantly older, like from an older time. I feel like we might have seen her in a tie-in comic, but regardless, she starts kicking Calvin's butt, and she's just like, oh, you're still just a normal human, Talon. We're something much better because we're like zombies now. And he's like, all right, well, let's see how that works out. So he tries like throwing knives and stuff like that, using his escape abilities to get farther away. And each time she's just like, nope, that's not going to work. And she's just charging at him. Eventually, he gets some high tensile strength wire wrapped around her neck to the point where like it's like a noose tightening. And it's like, oh, well, you're not going to be able to cut it. And if you struggle too much, it's going to literally decapitate you. So I'm going to be on my way now. Goodbye. So he jumps down an old chimney because sure, why not? And as he reaches the bottom, the Talon's like literally already there waiting. And she's like, I thought I told you we can't be stopped. So eventually they get into just a full-on fight. And Talon manages to take... It's a bit weird saying Talon. Calvin manages to take the Talon's knife from her and then stabs her in the side of the head. And she's still going. There's like no issue. So then he takes a taser and electrifies it, hoping to scramble up her brains well enough that he can get away. It does knock her out, but then the old guy shows up and she's like, hey, good job. You did a good job knocking her out. But cold is actually the only thing that does it. So he just pours a little bit of liquid nitrogen into her brain and says, yeah, that'll do it. All right, let's go. And at that point, Calvin blacks out. So 18 hours pass and Calvin wakes back up. And the old guy is like, hi, it's time that you and I had a little talk. And immediately Calvin just like throws a bedside table at him and tries to get into the air ducts in order to escape. And he's like, this is a closed system. You can't get, like, I just want to talk, okay? That's literally all it is. The owls aren't gone, obviously, but they're weak, and right now is when we need to strike. And Calvin immediately comes down and, like, freaks out, just like, who are you? How do you know my name? And he's like, okay, here's the deal. I have been monitoring all the Court of Owl systems since they left, and the reason I'm able to do that is my name is Sebastian Clark, and my father wrote a book on the history and the inner workings of the Court of Owls. And when the court found out, they didn't let it get released, and they killed literally everybody who knew about it, except for me. I managed to escape. So now I'm using that knowledge in order to take down the court. And they have to be taken down now because right now they're like spread to the wind. They're all across the globe trying to like regain their assets. They're super weak. Right now is the only time that the court is weak enough that we can attack. And Calvin's like, okay, why you keep saying we? And he's like, I am old and just a normal person. You are a Talon. You know their inner workings as well. You have the strengths and abilities to take them out. I need you to help me here. And he's just like, look, they're running scared. Who cares? Like, they're not after me. That's all I want. It's like, dude, we can literally end them now. I just need you to help. Like, you remember that woman you saved however long ago in the Zero issue? Yeah, they're going to be coming after her as well. Do you want that on your conscience? And he's like, I don't know. That seems like a lot of work. And he's like, okay, how about this? And then he opens up like a door, and it turns out that he managed to remake his old Talon outfit based off of designs and specifications he found on their computers. And he's like, I made you this. It's got some improvements. What do you say now? And he's like, all right, fine. Let's rip the owls apart with their own talons. But tis. It was good. I actually genuinely enjoyed this issue. I can't remember too much about what I said about the Zero issue, but this was definitely more of a, okay, we had this guy who was on the run in the Zero issue. How do we get him into Gotham so that we can, like, have him start his own plot? And we already established Court of Owls may or may not be done. So, yeah, it's a good enough way to get it into the plot that's moving forward. of it being, okay, the goal of this book is to dismantle the remaining tiny little pockets of the Court of Owls. That's what Calvin's job is. We got an old guy who I'm sure is 100% on the up and up. I don't dislike anything about the premise. I think my only critique, if you can even call it that, is the idea that he would like stop running just long enough to see if he could stop running. Like he was just he came back to Gotham despite the fact he knew it was a horrible idea, just to see if the Court of Owls were truly dead. And I kind of get that, but it does seem like for an escape artist kind of guy, he'd be fine with just staying on the road and keep running. So I don't know, it's whatever for me. Art wise, Guillem March, hit or miss depending on if you really like him or not. I think he suits this. I think that the art style is very energetic, very bombastic, and it really suits the character and the story being told, but it is hit or miss depending on if you like it. So overall, I'd say this is probably like a 7.5. It's a good start. It's a solid lead in. My critiques are barely anything worth noting. So yeah, it's just a decent start, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out. The Flash number 13, written by Francis Manapul and Brian Buccellato, art by Francis Manapul. We last left off with Flash was just defeated by the Rogues, and then a bunch of gorillas started coming out of the sky. So yeah, that's where we left off. Then we open up 10 years ago in a suburban home where Barry is working on some homework, and his adoptive father, Daryl, shows up, and he's all bruised and beaten from a night being a cop. And he's like, Daryl, why do you go out there if you're not sure you're going to be able to come home? And Daryl's like, oh, well, all of Central City is my home, Barry, and I have to protect it. One day I hope you'll understand that. And he's like, psh, count me in for an office job. Wah, wah. So then we cut over to 2 minutes ago where Daryl is the captain. I'm not sure that's ever been established, but he is. And Patty comes up with Turbine saying, hey, this guy, he knew my name beforehand, and also he says Barry is alive. So, like, we should listen to him. And Daryl's like, okay, I mean, do you have any proof of this? And he's like, no, but I can just tell you things. And at that point, the gorillas start coming down. So it's like, all right, well, we're going to put that on the back burner. So Barry's knocked out. All the rogues are like, oh, we could really use the Flash right now. Weather Wizard, could you wake him up? So he like gets a little bit of rain, makes it Barry wake up, and then it's like, all right, look, there are giant gorillas attacking Flash. You know anything about this? And it's like, yeah, one of them's named Grodd. He wants my powers. We're just gonna have to fight. And the entire issue after that point is like pretty much just an extended fight issue. So gorillas show up, Flash tries taking him on, and he's waiting for the rogues to join, and the rogues are like, screw that, no, you got this is your problem, bye. So they try to leave, but then of course the gorillas encircle them as well, and it's like, all right, well, we're gonna have to work together then. So all the rogues and Flash are working together. Golden Glider gets Flash out of a sticky situation like 4 times over the course of this issue. And we see the Grodd is a few blocks away, sitting on a makeshift throne with one of the white gorillas like chained around his neck. So clearly he doesn't like the group that allowed Flash to leave. So at this point he's like, okay, here's the thing. Flash is what I want, but there's also like another energy in the city that I can feel, and I'm going to go after that. So yeah. But then at that point, Trickster shows up, and Trickster's like, hey there, Mr. Gorilla Guy. Seems like you're making a play for the city. You could use somebody who knows the city like the back of his hand. I happen to be that guy. What do you say? And Grodd's like, I don't need anything from you, especially not the back of your hand. And he rips off Trickster's arm and then just leaves. So Trickster's now without an arm. Then we get... they don't say his name, but I think they said it in the Zero issue. It's Daniel West, Iris's brother, I believe, who just got out on parole. And as soon as he got out, there's giant gorilla invasion. So he's like trying to call Iris, trying to figure out where she is. Of course, she's still stuck in the Speed Force, but he doesn't know that, and he's just trying to make sure she's safe. So then we cut back to fight scene. we see that everyone's doing their part and doing a pretty good job, but the guerrillas are definitely putting up more of a fight than expected. And finally, they manage to get them all wrapped up in golden gliders, I don't know, tassels, ribbons, whatever you want to call it. And as soon as they do that, they're just like, okay, here's the deal. Grodd wants me for my power. I need to go find him. Can you handle these gorillas? As even more gorillas start coming down out of the sky, and he's just like, well, you're going to have to. Bye. And Flash zooms off looking for Grodd. And he's like, all right. I'm reflecting on that thing that was said to me in the first page, how, I got to step up and protect these cities because they're both my home and yada, yada, yada. Bringing it full circle. But then he arrives at, I believe, Dr. Elias's labs, because the place that Grodd went to was to the Speed Force batteries, where he has now broken them open, consumed the Speed Force, and is now a super fast monkey. So, yeah, it's a fast issue, no pun intended. I think I like it more than I don't, but it is definitely... I don't know. See, I don't know what I want from it. But I just know that this issue felt very light in anything. Like, it was more so just of a, like, okay, Grodd shown up and, like, now the rogues are working with him. Like, it just... Nothing felt like it really had any stakes in particular for this issue. Maybe it's because Barry has already single-handedly dealt with, like, all the gorillas on his own. And now it's like no different here, except that we're in Flash's home turf, which makes it seem like it'd be even easier to win. Yeah, this mostly just felt like set up for the rest of the arc, in that we needed Grodd to get Speed Force powers. And everything else leading up to that is just kind of like, okay, yeah, we're there. We get a whole thing with Trickster losing his arm. We get a whole thing of the rogues working with Flash temporarily. They make sure to say that numerous times. But the issue as a whole felt very light on content. So I don't dislike it, but it didn't do a lot for me, if that makes any sense. So yeah, it's a fine issue. It really is. And I don't dislike the idea of, Grodd having Speed Force or the gorillas showing up or the rogues working on them. I don't dislike anything they did. It's just a matter of it didn't feel like it went enough in any given direction. Like, I didn't really feel like the gorillas were causing that much chaos. I didn't really feel like the rogues struggled with working with Flash. I didn't feel like none of the plots really felt like that big of a thing. And even the point where they bookended it with Daryl's words to Barry when he was young, like, that just felt like okay, but like I just kind of need a narrative through line here. So we just randomly put this scene in the beginning, randomly had Flash repeated at the end, and it like doesn't apply as strongly as I think it should. So yeah, a bit rambly, but I feel like something's missing, but I couldn't tell you specifically what. Art-wise, looks great. I especially love the last page reveal of Grodd. He looks truly insane on Speed Force energy, so no problems there. So overall, I think I'm going to give this one I'm going to give it a 7.5, and the 0.5 is very tentative, but I don't want to fault it for something when I can't put into words why I dislike it, or not dislike it, but why I want more from it. Maybe that's just my own personal bias. I think it's a fine issue. I just think that there's something that's not quite clicking for me yet. Hopefully, that's just because this is set up and the next couple issues will be fantastic. But for me, just wanted a little bit more. The Fury of Firestorm, number 13, written and art by Dan Jurgens. This is essentially just, hey, remember everything we were doing before the Zero issue? Forget all that. Just none of it matters. It literally could not apply less. So we open up with Ronnie's mom is waiting for Ronnie for parent-teacher conferences because, yep, we've got to remember that they're high school kids. So at that point, Jason's dad shows up and starts talking to mom and says like, hey, Jason's not here either. Do you think maybe they're off doing Firestorm things? And she's like, yeah, I mean, probably. Hey, aren't our kids so great in their own respective ways? Ronnie with football, Jason with science. It's like, yes, they are. Maybe we should talk some more. So they walk off together. And then we cut over to Firestorm, which, again, at this point, is now Jason and Ronnie fused together. Ronnie in the driver's seat, Jason as a floating head that just advises Ronnie as to what to do. And Jason's freaking out, like, we're missing our parent-teacher conferences. Come on, we got to wrap this up. And he's like, dude, there's a giant robot destroying an airbase. Clearly that takes priority. So he keeps on trying to blast it with stuff. And then he's like, okay, whatever, let's try transmuting it. And the transmutation doesn't take. Like, he tries changing metal into feathers, doesn't work. Tries changing into plastic, doesn't work. And he's like, all right, well, if Jason's transmuting powers don't work, let's try Ronnie's blowing up powers. And so he blasts it, doesn't even wait until the smoke clears, and he's like, yeah, no, I'm sure that did it. And he tries flying away. But of course, it didn't work. And the giant robot is still going after him. So the robot flies up after Firestorm. And Ronnie's like, why didn't you tell me it could fly? And he's like, how was I supposed to know? Also, there's a whole thing in here where Jason, like, even when Ronnie's knocked out, Jason is still like, hey, Ronnie, are you okay? Can you hear me? Which I guess I don't understand how this works, in that you'd think that he would have some sort of insight to Ronnie's, like, brain, of him seeing that he's unconscious. I don't know. That just seemed like a weird one to me. Where it seems like Jason is just this ethereal, like he actually is a floating head outside the body. But whatever. So at this point, robot's still causing some damage. The actual military starts getting involved. We see General Eiling is scrambling the bombers. So at that point, Jason posits like, maybe this robot is made of a malleable alloy that stops it from transmuting. And Ronnie's like, all right, whatever. What else can we do to beat him? And Jason's like, well, maybe try destroying, like, the environment. If we can't affect him, we can affect the environment. So he tries blowing up a mountain, bringing it down on the robot. The robot fires off some missiles, which Ronnie dodges, but then they're making their way to the airbase anyway. So he transmutes the missiles into a bunch of soda cans, and he's like, yeah, we did it. And he's like, what about the robot? And they look around, and the robot's literally just not there anymore. It just left. And he's like, all right, well, call it a win. So we see where the robot went. It's called Data Zen, and it arrives back at this weird underground base, and there's some shadowy government and or anti-government place that's like, oh, we've gotten so much data from Firestorm, even on our just first test run. This is incredible. And there's a guy on the screen who's like, give me the reports as soon as you can. So Ronnie and Jason arrive at the school. They're like, oh, maybe we can still make it. Maybe there's still time. And they run into the school. They meet up with Tanya, who is the one girl who knows their secret, as they literally say, just like in a hushed tone. Like Jason's like, quiet, Tanya knows our secret about being Firestorm, but nobody else here does. And it's like, Jason, you could just say the first part, not the second, but regardless. So at that point, Jason's reassured, like, hey, just because you missed the parent-teacher conference, like, it's not a big deal, whatever. But then the football coach comes up to Ronnie and says, like, hey, your teacher tells me you're about to flunk history class. Like, if you flunk, you're not going to be on the team anymore. You need to be on that paper that's due tomorrow. Get on it. And Ronnie's like, yes, sir. And they're like, how much of the paper did you do? And he's like, I haven't started it. And it's revealed that firestorming takes up a lot more time. Also, he was helping his uncle put up a new roof or something. So Tanya's like, well, I can help you. We're going to do an all-night study session. Let's go. And Jason's like, I'm sorry, you taking my girl? What? Huh? But he's a lot less standoff about it. Anyway, Star Labs is attacked. We see a guard playing Angry Birds. Like, he vocally tells us that he's playing Angry Birds, and then a pen manages to pierce through his ear and, like, kill him. And then we see 3 people show up who are like, all right, make sure the alarms go off. We want somebody to show up to stop us. So at that point, the study session is apparently not going well because Ronnie keeps on wanting to take breaks. But then Jason comes in and says, something's happening at Star Labs. We gotta go. And Ronnie's like, but my paper. What should we do? And Tiny's like, I'll write your paper. If this is a life or death thing, I'll write your paper. And Ronnie's like, awesome, bye. And so they become Firestorm and fly off. They get to Star Labs, and immediately they are smacked in the head by one of the bad guys. And then another one shows up who's able to absorb his blasts. And he says, like, think of me as a living black hole. And then the third one shows up who has telekinetic powers and drops like an entire thing onto Ronnie. Again, which Jason is like, Ronnie, are you okay under there? You'd think he'd know. But then we see this, I don't even know, this is like 4 levels deep here. So we see the government facility is watching the fight. And it's like, well, do you still want him if he's so easily taken down? And the face in the screen says, yes, he's exactly what we're looking for. But then we see that this government facility is being watched by some weird silhouette in space who says, which is exactly why I must return. So we got like 8 levels of like people watching people. Sure, whatever. This is a 6. And not because I don't get it. I get it too much. Like, I get that technically this is the start of a new run. If you don't count the 0 issue, like people come into number 13 and they're like, okay, we got to figure out what's going on. So they take the little bits to tell you like, hey, here's how Firestorm becomes Firestorm. Here's who knows the secret. Here's this. Also, blanked over one bit. Ronnie's mom and Jason's dad come back to Ronnie's house together. And they seem to be a little bit all touchy-feely. So that might come up. Tanya is the only one who sees that. Anyway, yeah, no, this issue just, I don't think it trusts the reader to know anything. And on one hand, I get it, starting a new run, you want to establish like who knows what and what goes where and everything like that. But like, they're also setting up like 5 mysteries right now all at the same time. It's like, oh, here's Data Zen, and here's this group of other people, and here's this government organization, and here's this space organization. It's like, okay, but like, take a breath. Do 1 or 2 of those things, and then you can lay out more in the future. This just seemed a bit overkill. So yeah, it's a 6. Art-wise, it's okay. It's not great. Dan Jurgens does a fine job, but it is definitely house style. It is definitely, because he defined house style pretty much. So yeah, it's okay. It's not great, and we'll see where it goes from here. Teen Titans number 13, written by Scott Lobdell and Fabian Nicieza, art by Ale Garza. So this is just the backstory to how did Wonder Girl become Wonder Girl. And we open up with Cassie. She is in China and she's stealing jewelry. And it's said that, I'm going to go a little out of order here, but that her mom is an archaeological expert. She drags Cassie around the world to all these different dig sites. And when Cassie gets bored, she just goes into town and steals things. Because why not? And she's dressed as like full ninja here. And she's running away with this thing called the Claw of Tuobo. And she's tracked down by a cop who's got a gun trained on her. And she's like, uh-oh, this looks like the end for me. But then she meets him, a.k.a. Diesel, the guy who this whole arc is about. And Diesel's like, hey, I'm Diesel. And she's telling this story not to us as the readers, but to Superboy and Red Robin, who chime in every once in a while saying, like, that's a stupid name. His name's actually Diesel. That's dumb. So at that point, they immediately fall into, as she says it, lust at first sight. And they just start doing everything together. The entire time they're here in China. So they drive off on his motorcycle, and Cassie's like, I felt so safe with him, but also in danger at the same time. It was so confusing. So at that point, you know, the archaeological dig is done in China. They're about to move on to a different one. And Diesel's like, I'm going to follow you wherever you may go. And we see that she's recounting the story on a cargo plane, which they had to take to whatever location they're going to because Superboy can't carry Red Robin and a now depowered Cassie at the same time. So at that point, she says like, oh, we met up discreetly in hotels and blah, blah, blah. And this whole time, Cassie's like, is this TMI? Like, I don't want to get all 50 Shades of Grey on you. Which she actually says that. And both Red Robin and Superboy are like, yeah, okay. probably a little too much, but whatever. Let's just get this over with. So we see that they got this plane because they bribed some FedEx guys. Like, their names are literally on their hat, FedEx, without the second D. So anyway, they're talking about getting to the armor thing and how that happened. So one day they spent 3 months in Paris. They got to know what they were doing. And they were going to go to Venice next. But Diesel was starting to get, like, a little bit weird. Like, he's like, I don't really want to continue to do this. Like, you want to... He doesn't want to have to follow around everywhere. So she starts fighting with her mom at this point. Also, Diesel sells stuff illegally, so he's got connections as well. But regardless, she starts fighting with her mom and saying, like, oh, why did we stop digging down this branch of this tunnel? There could have been treasure just 5 feet away. And the mom's like, we're just getting a feel for where everything is. Like, don't worry about it. We'll be here for a while. Everything is about patience. So at that point, we see that Diesel was probably, like, he's the one who kind of suggested there was treasure down that A branch. So he took the initiative to go in even deeper. And we see that Cassie one night followed him down, like, significantly farther behind, but went down the A branch. And she makes her way all the way into this giant temple that is, like, apparently long enough to have its own horizon, deep enough to sink into darkness. So, giant temple, and she's like, wow, this is huge, this is an amazing discovery. But before she can even do anything, she hears Diesel screaming, and he's got this spiky mask thing attached to him, and he's just like, help me. And Cassie tries to get it off. The spikes are, like, puncturing her skin, and she looks over and she sees a pair of gauntlets on the ground. She slaps them on, and immediately she gets this thing. Like, she gets some amount of power. However, she can then feel that the armor that's attacking Diesel is more menacing. It has a soul of its own. It's called silent armor, and it, like, whispers to you and says, like, hey, I'm gonna eat your soul. So at that point, Cassie apparently just laughs and says, like, psh, you need someone stronger and tougher than Diesel. You need someone like me. So at that point, the mask comes off of Diesel, binds on to Cassie, and immediately starts, like, eating at her soul. And it takes true willpower and strength, someone that is able to guard this temple, which I guess was the whole purpose of it to begin with, in order to control it. So she really has to put in a lot of effort to keep it down at any given time. And she's like, but I did it to save Diesel. And then she turns to Diesel, and Diesel's like, give me it back. It was so much power. I need that. It's the greatest treasure, and you stole it from me. And before anything else can be said, the cave starts coming apart, and a giant rock just lands on Diesel. So he's dead. Like, through the yard, he's dead. There's no way he survived this. But anyway, she manages to leave using her powers or whatever. She climbs her way out of the cave, and she's like, I've been fighting this thing inside me all along. And Red Robin's like, okay, well, you could have told us, but you're telling us now, so we're going to help you out. So what we're doing is we're going back to the temple to try to find more answers about what the heck this thing is. And the FedEx guys look behind him and it's just like, hey, we're over top of where you want to be. And they jump out the back. And Red Robin's gliding down, Superboy's just flying down, holding Cassie. And as they make their way down, they see that when the cave fell apart, it basically ruined the entire archaeological dig. And also her mother's career. So her mother's not too hot on her at the moment. But they go down there, and Red Robin points out, like, wait a minute. This isn't part of this ancient Sumerian, like, language family I know about. This is the Mark of Trigon. So we'll get to that at some point, I'm sure. But then we just stop. The story's just over at that point. Mark of Trigon. And then we cut over to deep beneath Bell Reef Prison, where, hey, have you been reading Team 7? They really want you to read Team 7. So Amanda Waller has woken up, I think it's Kurt Lance. It's someone Lance, from cryo sleep or whatever. And she's like, hey, I need you to get me the Teen Titans. I'm their only hope of survival. And Lance is like, you want to make another Team 7? And she's like, no, nothing at all like that. You don't even know how that book ends yet. And he's like, fair enough. I'll go get your Teen Titans. So yeah, there's that. Okay. If someone wrote out the beats of the story of why Wonder Girl became Wonder Girl, I'm okay with it. I like, okay, fine. There's this ancient civilization her boyfriend went in and all that. I have no problem with the story as a whole. A lot of the dialogue and the narration coming from Wonder Girl, like, I cannot express how horny these goddamn teenagers are. Like, dear Lord, it is nonstop. So that's a little bit iffy in terms of just like, do I really need that? But my main critiques are between the narration and the art, because while I do think the parts that they draw look good, there are a lot of like blank backgrounds in this. There's a lot of like not putting in a lot of detail to certain areas because it's just, it's background. It's not needed. And at some points it's okay, but then like there's the part where you get to this temple and you're supposed to feel its majesty of how big it is, and it's just kind of like feels empty, like there's not a lot really to it. So yeah, it's got its issues. I'm not going to say it doesn't. Overall though, I'd say it's like a 6. I like the story, but the story is only the one part of it, and the other two, being the script and the art, are a little bit for me. So yeah, it's and who cares about Team 7, honestly? I'm so sick of it. I'm so tired of it being everywhere. As soon as they killed all the Damonites, all of a sudden it's just, now it's Team 7, guys. Get into it. So, yeah, 6 for this. We'll see how, I think it wraps up next issue. So, woo. I, Vampire, number 13, written by Joshua Hale Fialkov, art by Andrea Sorrentino. Last issue was a 0 issue, but then before that, we left off with Andrew absorbing all the vampirism from all the vampires in, I believe, the world, and becoming the only sole vampire left, and then turning Tig, the anti-vampire human he was with, into a vampire. So, that was 2 months ago, and apparently in the meantime, Stormwatch was like, oh, hey, you're kind of evil now, Andrew. We got to take you down. So they try to fight him, and like, they didn't stand a chance. They were beaten down hard by Andrew. So just like, okay, well, we'll regroup and Stormwatch will deal with it. Okay, bye. And they all left. And we see this is all told from the perspective of Mary Seward, who was Mary, Queen of Blood, who's now human entirely. And she's just been moping around for 2 months because Andrew took away not only her vampirism, but also himself. He's gone as well. And she's hanging out with John Troughton, Andrew's friend, and basically saying like, okay, so I've been reaching out to the superhero communities. Stormwatch, again, being unhelpful. I talked to Constantine, see what he knows. He doesn't know about Andrew being evil yet, so maybe we keep that from him. And Mary's like, Constantine literally couldn't do anything if he tried. Like, he's way too powerful. So at that point, Mary's like, all right, I just got to take a step out. And Andrew's like, well, we're going to save him. Okay, all right, bye. So Mary steps out in the snow, and she's walking around, and she's like a couple making out on the street, and she's just like, oh, God, humans suck. And she goes over this whole thing of like how vampires, like, they can taste other people's hormones in the air. Like, they are that sensitive to like everything around them. That's why they're constantly attacking like teenagers who are making out, because they can taste it. They literally can feel it in the air. And so she just walks around town and she's like, man, it was like 6 months ago. I had an entire army in this city, and like I was ready to bring vampirism, like make that the primary thing in humanity. And it's just, now I'm just a normal human. And as she's walking around feeling bad that she lost everything, she's attacked by someone who like throws her up against the wall, and she's like, oh, you do not want to mess with me. But then he ends up like punching her in the face, and she like nearly blacks out. And guy's like, give me your purse, give me your wallet, whatever you got. And Mary just goes up, bites his lip and rips it off. And then proceeds to grab his head and shove it into some wooden splinters that were there and just absolutely kill him. And she's like, that felt good. I needed that. That reminds me of who I truly am. I'm not Mary sulking around in the ditch and just waiting for my life to end. Nah, I'm Mary, Queen of Blood, quote, the baddest bitch who ever lived. I love that. So she grabs the guy's crucifix necklace that he was wearing and is just like, yep, we're going to go get Andrew. So comes back in, talks to John and says, all right, get your keys. We're going to go. Let's figure out what we're going to do. And he's like, are you sure? The last road trip we took didn't end well. And she's like, do you think Andrew would just sit around moping? And he's like, yeah, actually, he did that a lot. And she's like, well, I'm not Andrew. I'm bigger. We're gonna go back. We're gonna start at the beginning. We're gonna figure out the demon's lock. And they apparently don't know that Andrew was made directly by Cain into a vampire, because they're saying like, well, we need to find out who turned Andrew, who's his whatever it's called. And they're just like, okay, well, that's all the vampires are gone, so his sire, that's the word I'm looking for. All the vampires are gone, so that's not going to be that easy to do. And it's like, okay, well, there's one person who might have a better idea. And apparently, we go to the deep backwoods of Maine, and there's this woman there with her dog named Mishkin, and she's just chopping wood, and she lives all out on her own. She carries it inside her house. And she's like, oh, Mishkin, just you and me, the best way of living. And then all of a sudden, there's a knock on there's Mishkin feels somebody at the door. All of a sudden, there's a knock. She looks to see if there's anybody there via a little mirror. And she's like, well, I don't see anybody, or at least nobody who has a reflection. And then all of a sudden, there's a little girl's voice at the door saying, hello, is anybody there? I'm not sure if I'm in the right place. And this woman's like, oh, I don't accept visitors. Sorry. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. I just need some help. I think I'm lost. And so she's about to open up the door, but she's got an axe in hand. And then Andrew appears inside, and he looks like totally normal Andrew, not monstrous at all. And he's like, really? An axe? And immediately the woman like warms up to him. She's like, oh, Andrew, hey, how's it going? And it turns out this woman's name is, I think it's Deborah Dancer. And she's a human who used to be a companion of Andrew's. And she's just like, hey, I need you to invite, or you should bring my friend in. She's definitely someone who's big. And like, she's like, oh yeah, totally. It's like, yeah, just invite my friend in. She's like, did you say invite your friend in? And at that point, Andrew's like, oops. And Andrew turns completely monstrous, uses his energy to like blast Deborah back. Deborah gets her hand on the axe, plants it into Andrew. And Andrew's like, oh man, I don't want to kill you, but like, oh man, I loved having you around to manipulate. It was so much fun. And we see that the inviting thing was actually just, a ploy. They don't need to be invited in anymore. Tig is the voice on the other side of the door, blasts through the door, grabs a hold of Deborah, and Andrew's like, no, we're not going to eat her. We're going to turn her, because she meant something to me at one point, and I would love to corrupt something as pure and as kind as her. So we get a whole backstory here of how Mary apparently turned her into a half vampire, and some reason that like it doesn't make her want blood, but it does keep her like pretty youthful in some ways. I don't know. But Andrew's like, oh, I'm here to fix it. So now we're playing by a new set of rules. And before he can do anything, Mary and John show up and saying like, oh, hey, we're here. Let's get this party started. And Debbie's like, Mary, what the hell's going on? He's like, oh, I'm the good guy now. And we're here to make sure you don't get your head cut off, Blondie. So I love it. Here's the thing. I only just found out recently, and this is my own fault of not researching it more, that apparently this whole story took place, I believe, in like House of Secrets or House of Mystery, which was its own comic pre-New 52. And this is actually continuing on from that. Mary and them had a whole whole thing beforehand. So this isn't really so much of a reboot of a comic as it is a continuation, and I don't care. This did a fantastic job of like just saying like, okay, here's Debbie, here's what she is, what she does, why she's important, and it opens up the whole new story of Andrew being the evil one. And trust me, it really plays it strong. Like, we see this monstrous form, and then just that moment where he gives too much away and he transforms into like this monstrous form. Beautiful. Having Mary become the good guy, quote unquote, love that too. This is a 9. This is easily a 9. This is fantastic. My only saddening thing is looking ahead. The next issue is the last issue with Andrea Sorrentino on art, at least that I could see. Oh God, I'm going to miss this art style so badly, no matter what it turns into. This is just how I accept this book now. But this one in particular, it's a 9. It's an easy, just fantastic. It's changing up into a new arc. This is the 3rd time we've done that. The first arc was battling against Mary's army. The second arc was battling against the Van Helsings. And this is now just a battle against Andrew himself. And I've loved how it transitioned each and every time. I really have no problems with it whatsoever. So, God, I love this book. Justice League Dark number 13, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Mikkel Janin. So, this last issue, 12, we left off in Constantine and Black Orchid were going to look for the books of magic. They were attacked by a giant fire troll named Black Boris, and Zatanna and Deadman were going to Peru to attack Felix Faust's cult thing, and they were attacked by a giant forest thing called like Blackbriar or something like that. Anyway, so we pick up with Constantine and Black Orchid, who are currently fighting against that, and Black Orchid apparently uses some level of magic in order to restrain Black Boris. And Constantine's like, well, someone's got some explaining to do, and she's just like, shut up and do something to get rid of him. And he reaches into his coat and pulls out a tiny little fairy prison, which apparently works equally well on trolls, and it like absorbs in Black Boris, and they just toss him into the swamp and say like, all right, well, he's not a problem anymore. So Constantine and Black Orchid put it together that, all right, this was probably just a wild goose chase. The books were never here to begin with, which means that this was all just a trap for not only, or it was probably a way to get us out of the way so that Zatanna and Deadman would be more in a trap. So we got to go help them. So they hop back into the House of Mystery and starts moving their way over. But not before Constantine points out, like, based off your shape-shifting ability and your ability to manipulate the like roots that you use to trap Black Boris there, do you have a connection to both the red and the green, as Red and Animal Man and Swamp Thing? And she's like, that's classified. So then we cut over to the Amazon jungle, where Deadman and Zatanna are fighting Blackbriar Thorn. I was very close there. So, giant wood wizard guy. And Deadman just like, I'm just going to possess him. So he makes his way inside of Blackbriar, and he's got to do like a whole trapeze routine in order to dodge all the vines and branches and stuff in order to get down to the soul behind Blackbriar. And he takes him, possesses him, and then shrinks down in just normal man-sized. And when he does that, he's like, I did it. So they look around and they see what seems to be the House of Mystery arriving. But it's not. It's the House of Secrets, which is, of course, run by Nick Necro. The 0 issue was required reading. So Nick Necro steps up and he's like, hey, Zatanna, it's me. You already know Dr. Mist. We're here for the books of magic. So cut over to London, where Madame Xanadu is still just walking out of Timothy, I think it's Green. Timothy Green sounds right. I don't know. No, that's a horrible movie. Anyway, Timothy's house. And as he of course gave up his magic, and he is of no help anymore. But as she's walking away, the house literally explodes with magic. And it turns out Faust showed up, and he's like, oh, I need to take this boy because he's crucial to getting the books of magic, and you're not going to stop me. And Xander's like, the hell I won't. And she blasts Faust with magic, grabs Timothy, and they teleport their way out. Timothy's very upset, though, because his dad was left behind. So that's a thing. So anyway, back to the jungles of Peru. Deadman's about to try to attack Nick, and Nick just uses some crazy magic to essentially possess Deadman. And he's like, how's that feel? Bet you don't like that anymore. Zatanna tries throwing off some backwards magic at Nick, who uses even stronger backward magic at her. And just like, I can do whatever I want. I can make Deadman possess you and then make you come with me, but that's not what I want. I want you to come with me willingly. And she's like, I can't believe I ever loved you. And he's like, love me? You betrayed me. You literally left me. And it's like, I betrayed you. You were obsessed with the book's magic, and you were willing to were willing to sacrifice us to get it. Like, cut the crap, Nick. And it's like, all right, whatever. You sent me down to hell. I think we're even in that regard. So anyway, at that point, Constantine shows up. Black Orchid manages to land a blow on Nick, and Nick's like, all right, well, you're out of your ornament, Black Orchid. And he uses some sort of ability in that he's basically able to shapeshift into Black Orchid using her own magic and throws her away. He turns back into Nick, and Constantine and Nick start getting into like a little bit of a magic punching fight. And Constantine's just like, hey, look, whatever this is about you and me. And he's like, no, it's not. This is about you, me, Zatanna, and the books. Like, I want you to die. I want Zatanna to join me as I have the books. That's how this is going to go. And I'm going to kill you in front of her. So, and also you stole my coat, which is a major thing. So at that point, he's got Constantine on the ropes, and Zatanna steps up and just like, oh, stop. I'll go with you. Just don't hurt him anymore. And he's like, oh, I'm just going to continue to hurt him, but it can wait until after I have the books at least. So Zatanna goes up to Constantine, gives him a kiss, and says like, don't let him get the books. So she goes with him into the House of Secrets. And then as soon as they're inside and the house starts to like teleport away, Constantine frees Deadman from whatever spell he was under, gets Black Orchid up, and they run into the House of Mystery. And as they get inside, they have to he's meditating to make the house chase after the other house. And Constantine tells his demon butler, like, all right, now's the time. We got to release the gargoyles. So they let out this huge army of gargoyles on the House of Secrets. And Nick tells Dr. Mist to basically magic them away. So Dr. Mist steps up and he's like, I don't like listening to Nick Necro, but I do want to save my wife. So I'll do it. So he blasts all the gargoyles away, and in the process also blasts the House of Mysteries out of whatever magical stream they were in. And we see it appear in the middle of what seems to be a desert. And it just crashes down in the desert and essentially completely breaks with a earth-shattering kaboom. And that's how it goes. Next issue is the finale, which is in the annual number 1. So I like it. I definitely do enjoy it. I think it's a solid entry into the series. I think that the Timothy part kind of feels a little tacked on, but I get that, how do you show this magic part with a boy who literally gave up his magic? It's not the most interesting part, but I get that it has to be there probably for whatever happens next issue, or maybe even next arc. We'll see. A lot of this was basically just the explanation issue of, okay, we were introduced to Nick Necro in the 0 issue. We know everybody's plans and whatnot. The only one that we didn't know going into this was that Nick Necro was the leader, which once you read the 0 issue was pretty easy to figure out. But having gotten into that, now it's Nick's time to basically just monologue and rant and say, here's why I'm doing this and here's how I'm doing it and blah, blah, blah. So in that regard, it's an issue that has to happen. It did still have some good action, some good reveals to it. But overall, the primary focus was just this very, very monologue-y fight between Nick and the rest of Justice League Dark. So, do I dislike it? No, I think it's a solid enough issue, but it is also just kind of there because it has to be there. So overall, I give it a 7.5, and that extra 0.5 is because Mikel Janen's art is just fantastic. I really cannot fault anything in regards to that. It is beautiful to look at throughout. So, yeah, no, it's a solid issue. It's just a just kind of the part where we needed to have all this said before we got to the finale. And now we're going into that. So we'll see how it wraps up, and I don't doubt it won't be great. National Comics Madam X #1, written by Rob Williams, art by Trevor Hairsine. This is the last of the National Comics as far as I can tell. And it is focused on someone named Madam X, who deals with tarot cards and future sight, but is not Madame Xanadu. It's very confusing. Anyway, we open up, she's talking about like, oh, the cards, the tarot cards, they were introduced from like the Book of Thoth from Egyptian mythology, but no one's supposed to have the gods' knowledge. And we see her having a vision of a zombie against a full moon. And we're in New Orleans, and there's this zombie who is just making his way through the gardens of this very uptown sort of district in New Orleans. And there's a neighbor who's looking outside his window, and he's like, oh, the Meachams, they're away for the weekend, but there's someone in their garden. And he sees it's a zombie. He's like, oh, geez, call 911. Something's going on. So the next morning, the police show up to investigate. And as they enter into the house, they see that the Councilman Meacham, who is the one who lives in this house, has been stabbed in the chest and is dead via a very ornate dagger. And at this point, our Madam X, her name is Nima, she has seen all of this, and she's like, oh, I can warn them, I can stop it from happening. But then her vision continues, and she sees a woman performing a voodoo ritual, and she immediately is like, oh my, and she rushes over to the phone, but before she can make it, phone starts ringing, and she's like, you're calling because Ben Meacham's dead, aren't you? And she's like, how do you do that? Anyway, yeah, get down here to the office. So we're down at the a law firm, and apparently, she was right, Ben Meacham is dead, and we meet up with one of her co-workers here named Salinger, who basically Nima is hired on in the same way that like Psych, like the TV show Psych, she's a consultant and she's psychic, and the boss there really likes her. He's an openly gay man named Mr. Lin. And Salinger's kind of like the straight no nonsense, like, I don't believe in all this magic mumbo jumbo, but you somehow know these things, so we're just going to roll with it. So anyway, they brought her down because they have a possible new client, and it is Lauren, I'm going to butcher this, Joukuff, one of the two ways. I'm going to say Lauren. And she was the woman that Nima recognized as the voodoo woman in her vision. So it's like, okay, well, yeah, clearly you recognize her because she's been all over the press, because apparently she thinks she's about to be arrested for the murder of Meacham, because they've had a very public feud where Meacham has basically told the public that he's going to bring down Lauren and all of her non-Christian ways. And Lauren proceeded to douse both him and his wife in blood and saying like, oh, you cannot silence our religion. Here's a blood curse. So, yeah, they've had a bit of animosity between each other. And we can get the explanation that Meacham is running for mayor of New Orleans. This was going to be his platform of getting rid of all the voodoo mumbo jumbo. And Lauren was a up-and-coming, like, minor celebrity because she is running all these voodoo things. And people come down to a city that they built out in the swamp, a glorious, shining palace of otherworldly wonder, and wanting to see her voodoo magic. And Ben Meacham mocked their religion in a public, like, debate, more or less. And she didn't take too kindly to that, so she cursed him with blood magic. But she didn't kill him. But the knife that he was stabbed with did come from her. It was a declaration of war, more or less. So, not a good look. But the whole reason she came here was because Madam X is actually working with the law firm. And she's like, oh, I need someone who understands magic. And you understand magic. And we get Madam X's backstory of she was like a celebrity, sort of personality. She was able to do live predictions and stuff like that until one day she made a prediction that a billionaire was going to be robbed, and then he was. And so he sued her into like non-existence. So yeah, at that point now she's having to take these jobs with the police. So she starts pulling out cards saying like, okay, well, here I see your future and what you want and all this sort of stuff. But I do believe that you didn't actually kill Ben Meacham. So yeah, we'll represent you. But at that point, she actually does get arrested. And it's just like, all right, well, I did have a vision of something that night, but we need to go figure out what's up. So they head down to the Meacham's place and start talking to the neighbor who saw the zombie that night. And everyone's like, that's crazy. You're crazy. Like, you were sleepy, you were tired, you thought you saw something, it wasn't actually there. And he's like, I saw a zombie, goddammit. And then she chimes up and she's like, zombie only had one arm, didn't it? And he's like, yes, it did. Thank you for listening to me. And she's like, yeah, I saw a zombie in a vision, but zombies aren't real. Voodoo zombies aren't real. There's no point in getting all hyped up over it. But they go and talk to Lauren one more time, and Lauren's like, I didn't send a zombie. I don't know what you're talking about. It's like, all right, fine, whatever. But we do need to go talk to your little community out in the swamp, but there's no record of where it is. So can you point us in the right direction? And she's like, no. And then Madam X and her have a moment alone and is just saying like, here's the thing, Lauren. I don't think you're magic, but I am magic. Do you want to see what the cards say? What'll happen if you don't agree to work with us here and tell us what we need to know? And she's about to flip the card, and we don't ever see what it is, but I'm assuming it's the death card. So she gives up the location of the magic swamp city. They make their way down on like fan boat, and as they make their way, and just like, okay, so this is just going to be like a whole bunch of hippy dippy free love orgy people. So let's just go and get the info we need and get out. But as they get in there, they see that this place is like a shanty town. Like, it is a bunch of poorly made shacks and people who were very clearly high on heroin. And as they make their way in, they try talking to a couple of them, and they're just like, you have no right being here. This is our place, our magic. And Nima gets attacked by one of them. So Salinger goes and tries to get a handle on the guy. But the cards, they all fall, and they're pointing in the direction of a one-armed zombie. But it's just a silhouette of a one-armed guy. So Nima takes after the guy as Salinger's got his hands full with the other one. They make their way into the swamp. Some gators attack briefly, but then as it turns out, it's not a zombie. It's just a heroin addict. And he tries to attack Nima. Nima just fires off a taser. And the guy admits, like, yeah, Lauren sent me to Meacham's house dressed as a zombie in order to rile it up a bit more, in order to get more of a spook. But I didn't kill him. And so then Nima makes her way back to the little shanty town, and Salinger's been talking to one of the other locals, a woman who's pregnant. And it turns out the whole entire thing, and here's the whole plot, is that Ben Meacham was having an affair with this woman down in this shanty town, and he was going to leave his wife and was going to live with them. And it turns out that Ben and Lauren are actually longtime friends, and they actually staged this whole blood feud thing in order to get more eyes not only on Ben Meacham's mayoral campaign, but also on Lauren's voodoo thing. It was all just for the sake of fame and fortune. However, one day, Ben's wife followed him to this little shanty town and saw him having an affair. So she ran off, and later on that night, she killed him with the voodoo knife. So, yeah, we got all that. So, yeah, it was the wife who did it. And Nima and them are super not happy with Lauren. I'm just like, you literally, like, this is all your fault. You could have stopped this so much earlier, but because of your fame and fortune-seeking ways, this all happened. This is all on you. You suck. So, in the end, she got off on the charges of murder and all that. However, there was a lot of heroin in that town, so she's being tried on that. And the law firm has declined to represent her in that case. So, in the end, we get a little cliffhanger of she drops one of her tarot cards. It's the death card, because of course it is. And when she picks it up, she gets a vision of her being shot dead by her partner, Salinger. And Salinger comes up afterwards like, hey, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, dun dun dun. But of course we never see what comes of that because this is a one shot. So I like it. I think it's a solid story. My only real critique in this is that, I don't know, they do I've glossed over a whole bunch of her doing card readings that say reading into the personalities of these people, especially Lauren. It still didn't quite come off as magic. We know it's magic because she's actually having visions and we see those visions that she's having. But there's nothing externally of her doing anything that seems like magic. I brought up the TV show Psych before. I feel like that is a very apt comparison here, where yes, she is actually magic, but all the things she's doing are more so just I was just very observant, or able to con these people. I would have liked to see her do more undeniably magic things. That being said, also, it was a ridiculously circuitous plot. I don't dislike that, but it was something that I had to really slow down and take the time of okay, but what's actually happening? So overall, good issue. I don't dislike it at all. I don't think it probably would have gone more than a 6-issue series if it were to be an actual series, but it was a fine enough one shot on its own. So overall, I'm going to give it a 7. I think it's a nice solid read, but it's nothing super standout, especially in terms of these national comics. I think that Eternity was probably the strongest one, and the others were all very strong in their own right, but this one is probably on the weaker side. So 7 for this, and that's it for national comics. And that's it. That's all the comics came out from DC Comics. It's October 24th, 2012. And on top of next week being a 5th week, which I have mentioned about 100 times, where I'll be covering some backup stories, next week is also Halloween. Spooky time is here once again, and I'm sure DC is putting out just an inordinate amount of Halloween-themed horror books in order to cover that. So why don't we take a look at what they've got coming out next week. They have 4 annuals coming out, including Batgirl, Action Comics, Justice League Dark, and Swamp Thing. We have the number 13 issue of Aquaman, and the number 3 issue of the miniseries Phantom Lady and Dollman, because nothing says spooky like Aquaman. So it seems like Spooktacular this year might be more of a little bit of a boo rather than anything actually substantial. However, if you have any thoughts on the lack of Halloween comics, any comics I talked about this week, last week, any week, go ahead and hit me up on Twitter at DC Comics Podcast, all one word, at DC Comics Podcast. Additionally, if you have any extra spending money because you're not spending it on Halloween candy this year, you can go ahead and spend that all on Patreon at Mild Fuzz TV. Again, all one word, Mild Fuzz TV. For as low as $1, you too can lose $1. Thank you very much for watching and listening. I know I'm kind of rushing through the ending here, but it is because I have nothing more to say, and I have things to do. I mean it. I'm not just sitting here lonely every night. Why would you think that's stupid? Shut up. Anyway, goodbye to you all. Hope to see you next episode, and always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.